Ladies and gentlemen, hello, this is Internet Personality Evangelist, and it's V-Build time, and I'm going to finally tell you a little bit about this stuff. This is an old bottle. I've actually had this for years. You can see it's kind of getting a bit discolored from over the years. It still works, though. This is Pledge Floor Polish. I don't know if it's actually called Pledge anymore, but this is the one I got way back. This is the one everyone was getting. It's Pledge with Future. It has a different brand name now, but I think some of the words are still the same. It's usually clear, actually. This is all, like, as I said, from being old, I think it's getting a bit funny looking. But it is, whoops, basically a very watery, clear substance. That's what you're looking for. It kind of has a bit of a... I mean, I don't think the smell is going to be uniform in any way, but it's got... Mine at least has a bit of a I think, fruity bouquet, one could say. Anyway, the way I generally use this, and where I use it the most, is on ball socket joints. So I have a Coke bottle cap here, and it's actually got some floor polish built up in it from being used a few times. I usually use these until it's like up near the top, and you know, such that it would pour out. If I tried to add any more, then I just get a new one. But what I usually do is, I want to make sure you can actually see this. I take this thing, right, and then I pour a little bit of this in. And, oh, this thing's all jammed up. Hang on. Sometimes these get jammed up from, like, use. So, if you grab something sharp, and just, like, pop some holes in up here. I mean, there are 3 holes up here, but mine has been used so much they have generally kind of become gorged and clogged with used floor polish. We'll see if that fixes anything. But, this stuff... I like using more than super glue or nail polish, primarily because it's not a bonding agent, and it doesn't... Here we go, it's starting to drip out now a little bit. It doesn't chemically, at least as far as I can tell, it doesn't really chemically alter or affect plastic the same way that nail polish can, or, you know, obviously super glue does. So, it's a bit safer to use, and first test subject here is this generation's Megatron. I actually saved him all these years because he's got somewhat loose joints, and I thought, hey, he'd be perfect to show and fix. That means, since 2013, I've been meaning to make this V-build. So, if you're going to do a ball socket joint, it's the easiest if you can actually pop them off like this, because then all you do, you pop the ball socket joint off, take the ball part, dunk it. The thing about floor polish is, it tries to adhere to a surface. So it doesn't, like, gel up very much. It's very runny and tries to just stick to a surface as much as possible. So just giving this a dunk or two and, you know, rotating the figure around, it'll try to go around the sphere of the ball joint. Now, the nice thing about this is, since it's not sticky, what I usually do is I just then stick the ball socket joint back together and work it a bit to get it all over both surfaces. And then, depending on the kind of joint, you could just leave it like this. That is not best practices. I still do it sometimes because I'm terrible at best practices. But for best practices, now that, you know, there's a nice even coating there, maybe give it one more little half dip, and then you just leave it overnight, and it'll cure fully. However, it does cure to not be, like, liquid kind of quickly, you know, after a couple minutes. And sometimes I'll just stick things back together and let them sit like that. Now, if it's a joint that could rip, or, you know, if it's like a hinge of some sort, like one of these, and it's a hinge that's not very robust, and, you know, if that extra tension could cause something to break, you know, leave things apart till you put them back together. The other upside of floor polish is that it's pretty easy to remove. You can file it off, you can even just, like, gouge it off. Like, it forms a skin around the plastic, but it doesn't bond with the plastic, in my experience. So it's pretty easy to undo if you have to. Downside is, you need to re-up it every now and then. I haven't had to re-up everything, but sometimes I have a figure where it's a joint that gets worked so much that I find I have to redo the floor polish a bit every couple of months/years. This is like a loose joint, so for now it's not looking all that great, but we'll see how it turns out later. Now let's just say, hypothetically, you can't get the ball socket joint open. Like, it's wedged in there and you cannot pop it apart for one reason or another. And let's pretend that you can only access, like, the top bit here. What you can do is take a toothpick, and this is a lot harder, but if you just wipe the toothpick around in this a bunch, you can just dab it in there. Dab some floor polish in. And this is much slower, requires a lot more patience. But then, you know, with some floor polish in the joint, just like before, work the joint around a little bit. And I find in the case of ball socket joints, especially if you're just doing a bit at a time, if you just leave it for a bit, like leave it alone for half an hour or so, come back and just see how tight it feels, usually it's enough. If it's something that, you know, needs a lot more work, just use a whole lot more floor polish just over time, you know, add a little layer here and there. Floor polish certainly is not the be-all, end-all of joint tightening, and it's not going to tighten every joint in the world. I just find it usually works pretty well for me, and it you know, it dries kind of clear, and as I said, it's not very permanent, it's easy to get off, and it's re-uppable quite easy. So I like it a lot more than super glue and nail polish. Now, ball joints aren't the only thing. Like, let's say that this peg, let's pretend it could be tighter, because it's not super tight in there. I could do with it being a bit tighter. If you can just access the peg like this, again, it's super easy. Dip. Alright. Shake off a little bit here. By the way, always keep some Kleenex on hand, just in case you have like a bit of spillage or whatnot. This stuff does dry kind of glossy, so if you care about your space you're working on, of course, you know, take some precautions. When I say dry is clear, you know, it dries pretty much clear, but it is glossy. And if it gets scuffed or, you know, bumped around, it turns kind of white-ish when it's stressed or cracked. So be aware of all that. But let's wipe off the bottom of this, because that doesn't really need to be thickened. It's the sides we're thinking of. And then once again, like, if you want to, you can even stick this in the socket to get some floor polish into the socket. Roll it around in there. And then, in this case, I'd say maybe let them sit apart to cure. And air dry, and there you go. Now, that's not the only kind of joint. That's just the easy joint, or peg, to fix up with this kind of stuff. This Unite Warriors drag strip has, I feel, way too loose a knee hinge, but this is a pinned hinge joint. So floor polish can help this, but I don't think it's universally useful in this case. There are ways for this to be useful. You're adding a thickness in there, and that's the important thing. But one trick you can use is to use like a piece of, not really paper, but like thicker, glossy, cardy paper. And this is like dip a corner in and then slip that into the joint. And you know the thing I said about, like, hey, if you're using the toothpick to just dab drops on, that's kind of a slow application that is exponentially slower than just dunking the joint. This is super slow. Sometimes I'll just use a toothpick anyway. And I'll just, like, wipe the floor polish around the corners of where I want it to go into the joint. The upside of floor polish, as I said, is it's very watery, so it wants to flow into surfaces. Actually, I can already feel this having an effect. So we'll try that on the other knee as well. It's inexpensive. It's, I think, pretty damn safe. Exponentially so compared to using super glue or nail polish. And, like, in one bottle, you get this much. I've been using this same bottle for, like, I gotta be, like, nearly 5 years now. And that's how much I've used. Like, you don't need a ton. Like, I always end up pouring out too much. But, see, now it's kind of worked into the joint. The way I've applied it, it's a bit messy. Like, there's a bit on the back of the disc there, so that's gonna maybe be a bit glossy at a glance. But I really don't mind. And, yeah, so, again, best practice is, once it's in there and you've worked it in, let the figure sit for, like, a day. Technically, you could just let the figure sit for, like, an hour or two and then go and check, and there will be a result. But sometimes, if you don't wait the whole day and you start working it, you're going to see it stressing and turning white and then flaking off as you're moving it. Same with the ball joints. If that happens, you could just re-up it by adding a little bit more. But that's some general use of floor polish as I use it. It can be used to thicken slightly bigger hinges, but if you can get stuff apart, you can sort of apply all these different techniques together in your own way. And also, these techniques are not the be-all, end-all by any means, but check this out. I've already removed screws from here, here, and here. Well, removed or just, like, loosened and didn't get them out of the cavity. Pretty much, those 3 screws are what holds the leg together. So if you get them unfastened, you can take this part of the leg and just get it out of the way. And then you can take this part out. And what we're going to be tightening up is pretty much the inside of this giant hole. So, one place where you can start is taking some floor polish here and just, like, coating the tip of the toothpick and just smear it around inside of there. And then while you're doing that, you can also get onto the outer edge of the surface that'll be on the inside of that hole. Again, grab some floor polish and just smear it around on here. And this will take a little while. You gotta, you know, do at least one coating on this, what is ostensibly a large cylinder. And it'll take a bit, especially if you're doing it with a toothpick like me. I guess if you could sacrifice a paintbrush for this effort, that might speed things up a bit. I can't see an easy way to dip this in there, what with all the other stuff getting in the way around it. But yeah, just keep layering this stuff on to this outer ring here, and this ring here, and then the inside of this ring here. And just go until you feel like you're done, put it together, and see if things are a bit tighter. If not, pull it apart and keep going. Hey, we're back, and I filmed that ages ago. Anyway, that's been a V-build of how I tighten joints with floor polish. There are, as I said, people have their own preferred methods. Also, one last thing, when you're going to close this bottle, this thing, I find ever since I had this, when I push it down, it would fire some floor polish up and like squirt it out, and it'd be messy, so usually I like to wipe the top off and then hold this over it while I'm closing it. And I've spent, a couple months with it not closed, and then stuff got real. I thought I was being clever. Stuff got real gummy. I think that's why the bottle has started to yellow a little bit inside, so I'm closing it more often now. But, as I was saying, people have their preferences. Some people far prefer the nail polish or super glue technique, and there are other things on the market too. I know a lot of folks are starting to experiment with Bondic or laser bond or stuff, and I'm going to try some things out with this myself and maybe pop back in for another V-build later. But in the meantime, hope this was helpful. If you have any other questions, let me know and I'll try to answer them, but I have pretty much shown you probably 85 to 99% of what I do with floor polish, so hopefully that was informative in some way, and I'm so sorry I did not make this video a lot sooner than now. But in the meantime, stay tuned for more V-builds and reviews. Coming up next are some way backlogged V-build live edits that I've been meaning to do for a good 2 months now. But we're getting this build train back on track, baby. That's my pledge for the future.